Greetings and welcome, everybody. This is TalkingPointz Insider Report Chatz, our Insider Chats, where Dave, Michels, and I are going to be talking about the latest Insider Report we put out, and we have a guest as well. Dave, who's our guest this week?
We got another Dave. We have Dave Dungay, who is most famous for his prior work in a website we should be unnamed, but is also well known in the CXM in the awards industry. Are you there? How you doing, David?
I'm good. Thank you very much for that intro. Yes, my current position is at Customer Experience Magazine, where I am embedded in the CX space. Absolutely.
And I love how you have all 12 of the books that you own on display there. All 6 of the books you own on display. That's great. And because we have 3 Daves or Davids on this call, I just want to make it easier for everybody. Just call me the smarter Dave, if that'll be the to clarify.
I'll let you guys be Dave and David. Just use my initials like everybody else does. DJD. I have it monogrammed on a lot of my shirts.
You have 7 books, do you, Dave?
Well, I got Pac-Man going back there. So if you had been a subscriber to the TalkingPointz Insider Reports, my God, Dave, these things are getting harder to write every month. It's just amazing how fast things are moving.
You know, that's the first point in the Insider, because we talk about how AI is accelerating business, but I don't know if anyone realizes how much business has accelerated. It is unbelievable how much news is happening every month. It used to be pretty simple to make the Insider Report because all we do is look at the month's worth of news, curate it down to the best stories, and we're done in 10, 15 minutes. But no, the current Insider is like, it takes a month to do. It takes a month to do it. And that's why it publishes once a month. It is actually a lot going on.
Yeah, we normally hang things on the tree and then come back in and trim the tree and make sure that it looks nice. And the tree's getting pretty darn big, bigger than we want it to be. But there's, what do you want to leave out? There's stuff that you can't. There's just so many amazing things happening.
It's a busy time, and the thing is, it's not even just our industry, because one of the first stories we covered this year was actually the Strait of Hormuz. That was a big March story, and it appears to be a big April story. I don't know if you've heard, but the strait's closed, and somebody decided to close it. I don't really know the whole background here, but it's having a huge impact globally. I mean, how can this little bit of water have such a big impact?
Well, you would think that it's about the oil moving through the strait, which is the big deal. And I know that the oil prices are kind of reflected in everything. They're reflected in the cost of moving goods around and the cost of, delivering eggs and newspapers and airplanes and jet fuel. But you made a point in the Insider Report that it actually has other effects as well.
Well, and David Danto and I have kind of been debating a lot on this AI bubble thing. And David thinks we're about to have an AI bubble pop. And I say there's no bubble. And we've been going back and forth for a few months, and clearly I've been right. But the point is, whether you call it a bubble or not, we're going to see some big changes here. And AI is actually caught in the crosshairs of the strait closure. It's a lot of the chip industry is dependent on that strait. Who knew? And so I think it was a helium plant. Something like 35% of the world's helium goes down that strait, and that refinery got significantly damaged. So it's going to be a while till that comes back online. And apparently they use that helium to make chips. We're already seeing a lot of revisions to AI forecasts, partly because things are getting more expensive, partly because they can't get parts, partly because companies like OpenAI are reprioritizing their priorities. But we're definitely going to see a correction, but I wouldn't call it a pop. What do you think, Mr. Dungay? You going to say something on this video?
Yeah, absolutely. So look, I'm a Brit looking from afar, but it is obviously hitting us at the pump as well when it comes to the cost of energy. I'm looking at this the AI industry, and obviously it's an energy intensive space. We're seeing a complete global shift in how that energy is going to service that market, and Trump's been very clear to his allied partners, of which UK is one of them. Hey, if you need oil, America's open for business. So there's going to be, and you've obviously got Russia sitting there as well with their reserves. So there's going to be a huge shift in global supply to this market. It's the energy's there. It's just how do we all get it? How do we redistribute
But
it?
this is
Who
on
does it
top
need
of,
it?
and Mr. Dungay, you've got an opinion on this, I'm sure, being a Brit, but this is on top of the last few months of, I would say, a rising animosity toward the U.S. There's the whole NATO issue, there's the whole Greenland issue. We've been seeing a big rise in preference for data sovereignty, which wasn't there before, as wasn't as strong before. And I think that my sense is that a lot of Europe, for some reason, is blaming Mr. Trump on this for the closure of the strait, and in turn blaming America for this as something that could have been avoided.
Yeah,
If you,
without getting too political on this, I think that probably is a fair assessment. But I think it's not just the strait. It's Greenland, like you mentioned. It's every week there's a kind of a strategic political announcement as it seems, and what that means exactly. I think it's the confusion for the markets, for technology providers, and what that means downstream. That's the thing that's not clear for people. It's the uncertainty, and whether Trump has this grand master plan or not, who knows? But it's certainly making things uncertain for everyone else.
And Dave, the metaphor that I used around this bubble idea is not so much that it's a bubble. I mean, I use AI every day, all the time. You do, we all do. It's become part of our workflows. People have started to learn how to master it. I'm not anti-AI, but or at least I am, but not that much. But the concern that I have, we use the metaphor of mountain climbers all on the same rope. And that's really what's happening from the financial side of these AI companies. Meta makes an announcement that they're doing something and they're paying for it with AMD stock, and AMD is paying for it with OpenAI stock. And these guys it's the same dollar that they're all passing around between the companies. And when you get a global disaster, like I can't get the helium to make the chips, or I can't get the memory that I need in order to be able to GPUs, all of a sudden it doesn't just take down that company, it takes down everybody on the climber's rope. And that's the correction that I think is going to be coming back, because there isn't really enough isolation. There aren't enough firewalls between these companies. They're all playing with funny money, and the music's going to stop, and there aren't going to be enough chairs.
I think you could be right
well,
there, Dave, actually, and I don't. I think that you got this compounded problem of potentially there's not the ROI quite there yet for AI at a business level as well. What will happen when that music stops? What does that mean for businesses who haven't quite got there with their AI story? And that was one of the themes of Enterprise Connect. This is the year AI's got to happen. We've got to see that return. With those two things compounded, I think we'll see. I think we'll see some sort of dip for sure. I think the question is how big and deep is that kind of dip going to be?
Mm.
yeah. Yeah, no, it is strange. We don't normally talk about politics for good reason in the Insider Report, but it is all becoming so interconnected right now because it really AI effectively is driving the industry, and AI is at the whim of a lot of different external variables. Something as a little preview for the April Insider is this Mythos technology from Anthropic threatens to hack all kinds of websites, and so it's going to be really interesting as we, they won't release it publicly because they say it's too dangerous to put this out. And so, yeah, this is also going to be a pretty big story for enterprise communications because we're always talking about security. It's always one of those little background topics, but AI is driving everything right now. So let's get to the next story, actually, which is Enterprise Connect was the AI show. It was an absolute AI show, and all three of us were there, and we all got to celebrate and rejoice around AI together, and that was kind of an exciting moment. What was your take, big take on Enterprise Connect, Mr. Danto?
It was really mixed. It was the first year that it wasn't in the Gaylord Palms in Florida. As we know, it moved to Vegas. I applaud the move to Vegas. I think it's a better venue in general. They probably picked the worst place in Las Vegas to have this conference. It's sort of in the middle of nowhere. I can think of a dozen venues that would have been better for it, but this was the one that they got for free. So this is the one that they used. Got for free because, it had been left over from the HIMSS
Yeah, because they'd already paid for it. Is what not
right.
For free, but
not for free, but yeah, they didn't have to pay additional for it. There were plenty, and I'm going to be completely, you can see the shirt behind me, the brutal honesty. I'm going to stick with my brutal honesty. I think the show is valuable for me. I think it's valuable for the industry to get together under an agnostic umbrella and hear from each other and understand what's going on. There were a number of people, at least a dozen that walked up to me and said, "What do you think of the last Enterprise Connect?" Or "This is what a dying trade show looks like." And, there was certainly that feeling in the room that you not only had Microsoft not keynoting this year, they were not attending. And as I wrote in one of my articles about this, I completely respect and will defend to the day I die their right to decide where to invest their dollars, to where they want to exhibit and where they want to be a keynote speaker and where they want to do anything else. But it was wrong not to send somebody. I think they should have had one or two or three people in attendance. We were all there. We, the users, the analysts, everybody else. I know they want to focus on other conferences, and they are going to focus on other conferences, but they should have been there. And I think the fact that they weren't put a little bit of a pall on all of the events. Cisco had a lower presence. Zoom had an exaggerated presence because of the absence of everybody else. They probably invested too much in that show and too little in HIMSS, but that's another story. So I think it's a mixed bag. And, we've got a date for next year's show, which is going to be at the MGM Grand, which is a much better facility to be doing the show in Las Vegas. But I say if you speak to everybody that attended the show and ask them if you think the show's actually going to happen, you're probably going to get a 50-50 answer.
Oh, it'll definitely happen, and it needs to happen. It is a bad thing for a show when the biggest vendor in the space says they don't have time for it, and the second largest vendor in the space says the skeleton crew. So that is bad. But I do this EC report every year, and I put together a theory of what's going on here, and I'm going to blame a lot of this on AI. And the reason I got to that is because AI is a little tricky right now, a little confusing, and the vendors are confused. They don't know how to charge for it. They don't know quite how to secure it yet. There's a whole bunch of vendor questions, but the enterprises are really confused by this, and so we saw this over at HIMSS because at HIMSS it was a lot of the same vendors were there. And that show was vibrant and alive and well. And the difference to me was that the AI there is focused on outcomes and workflows, and it shows this is how you book an appointment. This is the next step in the sequence, and it showed how AI could help. Where in the Enterprise Connect show, it was saying these are the tools that you could adapt. It was a little more nebulous, and it didn't quite resonate as well. So I believe that as AI settles, the horizontal play will become more important because not always telecom vendors, they'll go to a healthcare show, but they're not going to go to a bowling alley show. I mean, it's a horizontal play inherently, and so they'll come back. But I think there's a number of things that the conference has to do to kind of re-gear for this transition, which to me is to prioritize around industry needs. As you pointed out, we've got the whole industry here together. Let's solve things like interoperability. Let's work on standards. Let's work on partner programs, and let's work on getting some certifications out. Let's, because when I go to Cisco Live, they have a whole section there for people getting their Cisco exams. But you can have a smaller section for Cisco exams, Microsoft Teams exams. Let's get all these engineers there. And so I think that there's an opportunity to make the show a little more industry focused as this transition plays out. Because last year's EC keynote, I went back, not keynote, paper I wrote, it said the big theme was agentic AI. And I thought, well, wait a minute, that was this year. And so things are kind of moving a little slowly there. And like I said, there's some confusion. But I want to get to the biggest story. The biggest story at Enterprise Connect had to be the Salesforce drop. And so, Mr. Dungay, how did you react to that?
I mean, I can't say I was overly surprised by it, but I will say I felt a bit sweaty in the room for some of their other partners who may not take the news quite so well, particularly Vonage, who was there in a bit of force as well. So there was that question mark over there. What does this mean for their current sort of partnership vendors? And then there was also the question mark: why have they built this themselves? Why didn't they acquire? I think we probably disagree on this slightly, Dave, but I think you acquire someone when you need customers. The Salesforce doesn't need customers; they have a lot. So they've built their own CCaaS solution to go alongside here. So I think it's a great move. It's a play for the customer interaction data, isn't it? And as that AI develops, that's going to be the battleground. We're going to see these CX experiences. Really, that's where it's going to happen. So that was the big story for me. What did you think? Should they have acquired or should they have built it?
Well, I think it's going to be, the way Salesforce presented their new move into CCaaS, this is not going to be a quick path. This is going to take some time. It takes a while to build a CCaaS. And even Salesforce, which has a lot of expertise, a lot of cash, it's going to take a while. Amazon, it probably took them, I'm going to say 3 or 4 years to get it to a global state. And then it took them about 7 years to get into a leaders quadrant in the magical. So it's going to take some time. And so I don't understand why they didn't acquire. I think, you say you go acquire for customers. That's a popular reason to acquire. A lot of companies acquire for technology. Zoom is actually really good at that. They tend to acquire little tuck-ins and go for the technologies. But the thing is, you look at what Salesforce has to build. They have to build a global network, and yeah, they'll go to companies like Bandwidth, and they'll get pieces. But they're going to have to put this whole thing together. They're going to have to get it super reliable. They're going to have to get it multi-channel. They're going to have to get things like FedRAMP, which are going to take them years to get accomplished. And so what they're doing, what they're communicating in their launch was, we're starting off small for SMBs, and all this little code language saying we don't know what the hell we're doing, and that's expected. We know it'll take time. So why didn't they just go and acquire? There's a lot of CCaaS companies in our space. A lot of them have this already all figured out, and a lot of them are dirt cheap. A lot of them are way undervalued because there's all sorts of confusion and uncertainty in the world. And so I think it would have been much better for them to have gone off and acquire a firm, because now they've really got to establish credibility just around dial tone before they can do anything else. But right. I like the way you described. I like the way you described the sweaty in the room, because the whole industry, the whole CCaaS industry, has partnered with Salesforce. They all will point to Salesforce and say, we have the best integration. We can do everything with Salesforce, and we can use their desktop, and we do everything for you with Salesforce. And it's like Salesforce just turned that whole ecosystem into they just basically buried it. They just buried that. And so all these partners that as of today are the greatest Salesforce partners know that the clock is ticking, and now they have to figure out a new strategy. And I think I'm betting on CCaaS. The phrase I've been using in my coverage is short CRM, go long on CCaaS, because I think CRM is heading rapidly toward obsolescence. Mr. Danto.
Yeah, no, I'm a question. Here's a question quickly for you. What do you buy first? Do you buy your CCaaS first, or do you buy your CRM first?
No, CRM is obsolete. There's no need for CRM anymore.
You think?
I'm seriously. There were three contact center keynotes during Enterprise Connect. RingCentral did one, Amazon did one, and Zoom did one. They all featured contact center. None of them talked about CRM. I take that back. They all mentioned CRM as another data source, just like a bunch of other things that they connect to. None of them considered it a CRM-centric view. Companies like Amazon already have a full customer profile capability. They can already do a lot of this stuff. The virtual AI agents is where the industry is going. They don't need an agent desktop. CRM is absolutely, and you can see it in Salesforce's stock price. You can see CRM is absolutely headed toward absolute obsolescence. It has a database which is cheap. It has a UI which we don't care about anymore, and it has some business logic which will be done with the AI and workflows. There's no reason to have, and you look at the cost. Salesforce already is super expensive. Add CCaaS on top of that. This is ridiculous. Just get rid of that whole thing. So you don't need it anymore. And I mentioned Amazon already has the customer profiles. Zoom just bought a company called Bonsai that does CRM. The CRM capabilities of managing a customer is going to be in the CCaaS, and then the last point there is that most of the valuable data in a CRM anyway came from the CCaaS, came from customer conversations. So we just don't need the CRM anymore.
Yeah, and the only point that I was going to make about that is I can never understand a strategy when a company announces a new offering that essentially undercuts their partners. That just creates a lot of bad feelings in an industry that's very small, where people move back and forth, where customers move back and forth. I just never see that as a winning strategy, especially in your point, David, where they're not going to be ready for a long time. It gives the embedded organizations a long run rate to be able to say, well, don't go there, go here. I just don't see that turning out well for anybody. But maybe it is that there isn't enough feed for all the fish in the barrel. That could be the reason that they're making the move. So that's my feeling about it.
I think it speaks to their confidence in what they can produce in a relatively short time. I don't think it will be long before they're credible in CCaaS personally. And by that I mean it would be less than 2 years.
Well, it'll certainly be less than 2 years in the US. It'll certainly take them longer globally. It'll take them longer with things like FedRAMP and government and larger enterprises where they have much more sophisticated requirements. But the point is, it's a sinking ship. It really is. And the whole, the software apocalypse, that they're under stress. They're going to be trying to be building a new business while they're under stress, while they're doing layoffs, why they are trying to figure out how to patch the bailing water, whatever you want to call it, and for CCaaS to effectively for enterprises to reposition with a CCaaS centric point of view is not going to be a lot of work. It's largely very possible, and now they have a real incentive because they want to reduce that cost. I mean, a lot of the CCaaS features, they have to keep adding features. They can't raise the price. Now they get to add a few features and offer customers a huge cost savings. And so I think we're going to see some rapid development on the CCaaS side. But I realize, I guess I kind of just pushed us into enterprise, but I realize I'm looking at our insider report. I skipped a story. And it's a story that David's really passionate about. So I'm really sorry, Mr. Danto. We skipped the Android video bar story. And so let's get back to that one here for a minute.
No problem. I mean, I figured you guys were going to go down the CX rat hole for a long time. So I was just going to let you go as long as you wanted to go and come back to it afterwards. The thing that I raised here at the Insider Report and then published in an article a couple of weeks later for people who aren't our subscribers, is the idea that the Android video bar, which revolutionized video conferencing, the idea that you no longer need these integrated rooms, you no longer really need separate components, you drop it in and go, everybody's got one. Yes, there are a few of them that are just peripherals and they work with separate compute, but most of them have this Android operating system. We had Microsoft with its MDEP come in and revolutionize the space, and that's another interesting thing we'll talk about over the next few months. But the story was they're cheap. The story was for $1,000, $2,000, you drop it in and go. So instead of building a $50,000 or $100,000 room, you drop 10 of these in, you get 10 rooms, 20 rooms, very easy to install, add a display, run a wire, run some power and a network drop, and you're done. And this AI frenzy that we've been talking about for the last, well, at least for this video, but certainly for months and months, has made the feeding frenzy on chips and memory go crazy. You can't get regular memory. Gamers are complaining. Data centers are complaining. The orders going in for memory now are raising the price through the roof, and people are making commitments 3, 4, 5 years down the road. The chips simply don't exist. Well, you know what? A lot of these Android video bars are based on Qualcomm chips that either have embedded memory or require separate memory, and they're not going to be immune from this. So are we going to take the $1,500 video bar, which was the breakthrough we had at Infocom last year, $1,500 Android video bar, running MDEP, being able to be Teams or Zoom compatible? Are we still going to want it if it's $2,500? Are we still going to want it if it's $4,000? Are we going to start to see a trend moving more toward the BYOD? You know, BYOD used to be a, personal opinion, terrible experience where, you know, you'd put your notebook into the room and that would be the running the meeting, but you lost your ability to do email and everybody's voice was identified as your voice and they weren't able to do anything. Well, now BYOD's improved. You know, you can set the BYOD device to say, I'm using this as the room's system, and all of a sudden anybody who's registered their voice can be tagged correctly. Are we going to see more companies saying, all right, we're going to switch to a BYOD plan, we're not going to put these appliances in? I think it could have a tremendously dramatic effect on the way we design rooms and systems going forward. And all because of these memory chips that are going to be committed to things that aren't even built yet.
Well, but isn't that a I agree that the video bars are going to get more expensive, but everything's going to get more expensive, right? We're already seeing that. We're seeing that with, you know, inflation and tariffs and stuff like that. But the alternative of the video bar, which is one of the cheaper options you can do right now, the alternative is A, travel. And we saw, you know, when travel got really expensive before, that you reduced travel and did more video. And B, more PC-based or a more elaborate video system rooms. And so, or BYOD, like you mentioned. So in the scheme of things, to me, it doesn't seem like it's going to be penalized any more than anything else, and it's still going to be a really attractive option.
Well, I do think it's going to be penalized because if I've got 100 people in a company and I give each of them a compute device and I can use that compute device for conferencing, why would I spend $3,000-$4,000 on a video bar when I can now put in a peripheral video system in the room that connects to that BYOD device, in many cases wirelessly. In many cases, I can still manage it on the network, but I don't need to pay for an operating system and I don't have to pay for a room license. So I think, you know, we were at a tipping point with these bars where they were just inexpensive enough to be a solution that we could scale. And if we push ourselves past that tipping point, because they will be affected by shipping and fuel and tariffs, just like the cost of eggs, just like the cost of airplanes and everything else. But then on top of that, the price to build the components is going to go up. And this is another one of my pet peeves that I don't want to go down too much of a tangent on. But most of the companies that are selling these bars aren't making these bars. They're going to third-party ODMs that are making them, and that's the little secret that nobody in the industry wants to talk about. Then I say stupid because I'd like to know what ODM is making it, because there's some that are better than others. And I'd like to understand that these guys are making better, efficient purchases with memory, and that their bars will be less expensive. And again, I don't think I'm going to win that fight. I think everybody's going to keep it secret as to who's building what. But I do think we're going to get double and triple compounding on these costs, and it may change the balance of what we do. Certainly won't send people to doing travel, because travel not a. I wrote an article 10, 15 years ago, which I will stand by to this day, which is, you know, was telepresence killing travel? I said, no, telepresence was not killing travel. Travel was killing travel. The horrific experience is why I'm looking for some other option. You know, I'd rather do anything than have to go to the airport and deal with the airline. So I don't think that's going to change. I think we're all going to do as much as we can over video. but we're going to do more video over our general compute devices, which again puts Microsoft in a much stronger position and puts BYOD in a much stronger position for where enterprises, I think, will be going.
All good points. And the one I was thinking of too is smartphones, because smartphones have a lot of memory in them. I think my smartphone's got, I don't know, a lot of memory, double digits memory, and they're going to get a lot more expensive combined with the tariffs, because none of those are made in America either.
Well, most
So,
people today still rent or rent to buy or whatever, get their smartphone from their carrier. So, they don't care that it's a $2,000 phone because they're paying for it, $25 a month for forever. And that's the model that's worked for them. But in terms of equipment, you don't see that happening here. These are straight capital purchases from a lot of these companies. And again, I just think it's going to possibly sway the direction things go in.
I think you're right, David. I think people time and time again have shown how price sensitive they are when it comes to video, and they will accept a slightly worse experience. If that's the right price at the end of the day, and that is what a personal device will give you, right? Slightly worse experience, but it'll still do the job.
And I could probably get a dozen people on our video call here to argue that it isn't a worse experience, that you pair it with the right peripheral and with the right software, and it's just as good. And that's a debate here or there. But the point is, these devices have been winning the market, or winning at least the majority of the market, based on the fact that they were cheap. They were easy and cheap, and you could slap them in. And when they're not, I think it's going to be an upheaval to that space. So that was one of the big stories that I don't think many people were prepared for, because they see the cost of chips going up and the cost of GPUs going up, and they think, oh, AI, we're going to have to build data centers in the ocean and on the moon, and they don't realize it's going to start affecting their cars and their phones and their video bars and everything else.
yeah.
So now that I got my air out on that one, why don't we go back into the CX conversation and see what was going on there? That some of the companies, I know you had some information about Verint and a few other organizations. What were the big stories there?
Everyone's looking at Verint because they were recently acquired and they went with private equity. That seems to be a recurring theme on companies going private equity. I think this is probably the worst timed acquisition ever, because Thomas Bravo acquired a software company like literally weeks before the software apocalypse started. But the strategy is for Verint and Calabrio to be combined into a more streamlined organization and benefit all their customers. And one thing they announced in March was that they're going to bring all their Verint bots, which are very, very impressive bots. They have strong ROIs, and they've been very successful. They brought them to the Calabrio customers. They can't bring them all right away because the Verint bots rely on data, information, and data that's in the Verint structure. So it's going to take a little time to get all of them moved over. But they brought the big ones over. They brought some powerful bots over, and I think it's a really nice win for Calabrio customers. The world is still waiting to see if the Verint customers are going to get any kind of benefit out of this merger or acquisition, but not yet. Maybe tomorrow, not today. But at least Calabrio customers got a little bit of a gain there. But another thing on the contact center side, since we have Mr. Dungay here, this is a kind of a theme at Enterprise Connect. There was a lot of conversation about AI agents, virtual agents, and human agents working together. And I've always thought this is kind of like a kumbaya type of thing, and to make sure that people respect each other's privacy and space, and you have to put tape on the floor to mark your space. But it's actually not about that. And a lot of these companies are really diving into this with some new tools. TalkTest stands out. They did a pretty nice demo for me, where it's actually really complicated. And I hadn't really thought about all these nuances. But the issue is that virtual agents do things well, certain things really well, and human agents do certain things really well. And so when you're trying to run a contact center and you have both on there, and you're watching your patterns and your traffic change and requirements change, you need to turn one up or turn the other one up as necessary. And it's easy to turn up the AI agents. You just turn the knob and pay more money and you get more AI agents, and then you turn them down again. Human agents are a little harder to turn up because they tend to come with 8-hour shifts or longer shifts, and they tend to have a little more. Um, I would say that they bring their baggage. But the issue, but human agents are much better at certain things. You need both, and so I really like the way these software tools we're looking at. Well, okay, so you're going to have this kind of thing, password resets and stuff like that. Turn up the AI agents; they can do that better. But X percentage of those require a live operator for whatever reason, and they have to turn those. So the mathematics that goes into this, the cost of the AI agents, the cost of the human agents, the skills requirements of the human agents, the shift requirements, the seniority requirements, it gets really complicated very, very quickly. And I think it's a pretty interesting area for a lot of these companies to be planting a flag.
Yeah, absolutely, Dave. I mean, in one respect, I feel like managing humans and AI agents on the same platform is only going to show that we are the inferior species when it comes to intelligence. But on the other hand, we know that there's been a big topic of conversation around handoff between agents and humans and who's getting it right, who's not. And that is a huge area where a lot of companies are dropping the ball. How many times have you been on a chat on the web, just want to speak to a person, and that experience is clunky, it's not straightforward. And that, I think that is really where the magic is in this kind of story, I think. But yeah, as I say, is it not gonna just show us all up as human agents? We're only good at the empathy now. That's our last bastion sort of of skill.
Well, I was having a
Actually, the bots are getting
conversation.
pretty good at empathy.
I was having a conversation with an agent for a financial services company, to be nameless, a couple of weeks ago. And I was talking to them, and they were speaking back to me in beautiful, crystal clear English. And we were having a conversation, but I noticed every time I said something, their response was delayed. And I'm thinking, well, the delay is a little bit beyond the length of the delay that would be just accounting for the fact that, you have phone lines and digital and IP and everything else. And I finally realized that they're speaking to me in English, but they're not really speaking in English. It's being simultaneously translated. And is it being simultaneously translated from a contact center somewhere in a third world country, or is it being simultaneously translated from a bot? I honestly, I don't know. I couldn't tell. It scares me, and it now has me in a situation as a customer that's on the defensive. We were having a conversation with another financial services company, and in order to prove who we were, they wanted my ATM PIN. They wanted me to literally say my PIN over the phone to the bank that I do the PIN with. And I said, sorry, I draw the line there. And we have to stop talking and wait for me to be able to go to the branch, because I'm not going to. Who am I? Am I saying that to a bot? Am I saying that to the wrong company? So I think we're a little cart before the horse here with a lot of these technologies, that we haven't really tested them on the public and seen what the response is. Dave, I know you wrote a great article a couple of months ago, a year ago, about trying to use the AI operator in a hotel, and the few words that it should know, it doesn't. And I wrote an article about a year ago about the idea that we're all enamored with this word agentic, because it makes bosses sound like they can replace agents, which is not what it means. But I think a lot of these technologies are going to fall flat because we haven't tested them on humans yet.
There was an interesting twist on the agentic thing by Jensen Huang, the CEO of NVIDIA. So much of the conversation with AI is how much people can I get rid of? How much how big of a layoff can I have? And Jensen kind of flipped it, and he said in one of his keynotes, if you're laying off people and you have lack of imagination, we're giving you a tool to be more productive, and the only thing you can think of is to lay off people. You're a failure at management. I thought that was a nice little table turn. But he doesn't care as long as you buy the chips. But I've had a couple interactions with an agent that I was sure was a bot, and I was having a text conversation with an agent, and there were signals that I was sure it was a bot, and I asked it, "Are you a bot?" And it said, "No, I'm a human." And then I was thinking, well, of course they would say they're a human. What, if they're designed to imitate a human, and then I kind of realized, does it matter? Does it really matter to me if it's a bot or, I mean, did my problem get resolved? In this case, it was a no, but did my problem get resolved? Yes, that's what matters. And do I really care? It's going to be one of those things. It's too new right now, but give it a few more years, it's going to be one of those things like race or religion or something like that, where you're not really supposed to ask. You must be a Catholic. It's like, no, then it becomes a rude thing, right? And so you must be a bot, because does that mean that I give you bad service? Does it mean I give you good service? Does that mean my English was perfect? What does it mean? And why are you such a bigot? I think the ultimate question really is, was my need resolved? And that's really all that matters.
Well, Dave, I think you brought this conversation full circle, because the point that I want to highlight, and I think you should really speak to as well, and David, I'd be interested in your opinion, is you said exactly what I'm thinking. Give it a few years. The technology isn't really there yet. It's there, but as soon as you stress test one area or another, it was like the first autonomous cars. As long as you're on the main road, you're fine. As soon as you make a turn off of it, we're in trouble. But we're in a situation where companies feel like if they've not jumped in front of everybody else, they've been left behind. So we're in this tremendous race to get things out more quickly that aren't ready yet. And that's the speed that we're referring to. And you've got companies, unfortunately, that are making, well, there are companies that are making great predictions, and there are companies that are making bad ones. I don't think a month has gone by where Microsoft hasn't changed what Copilot means, where it is, what it does. And when I raised that question with a couple of the Microsoft people that I know about, that I've spoken to, they said, well, that's because that's how quickly the technology is changing. And is it? Shouldn't we say, look, I'm not, this is our beta pool. You want to try it, fine, but this is our production environment. We're not going to release anything new here unless it's ready. And I don't think we're making those standard good IT decisions about development and production. I think people are running to get, the next version of code, the next version of AI out faster. And I think the society is suffering as a result.
I think there's two sides to this coin, really. It's in some respects, I think it's a feature, not a bug. The fact that companies are putting out products that maybe aren't quite there yet. I had a situation where I was wrestling with the United Airlines bot on their app on the way home, trying to sort something out, and it just
source spot, United Airlines, source spot.
It just could not quite understand what I wanted. Maybe that's my fault. Maybe it's the bot's fault. But the point is, I bet you in 6 months' time to a year, it will be better. Okay, so you need to put these things out into the real world to get those data points, to get the bumbling British person asking questions on the app, so it can understand in time. So that's a feature in my opinion. You need to put these things out. The other side of the coin is mitigating brand reputation issues. If you put something out that's really not most of the way there, you're really risking your brand reputation. And we know in the CX space that can be a disaster, and that impacts share prices, bottom lines, and all those kind of things. So I think it's two sides to that coin.
So gentlemen, what do we think will be in next month's Insider Report? Dave, you already mentioned one thing, but is there anything else on your radar that you're kind of looking at?
We built it all month, and there's actually been a surprising amount of stories that are already popping. I just saw Intermedia got acquired now by going private equity. That comes to mind. I just added like 2 or 3 stories in there today, actually. The way the sausage is made is we collect stories all month that seem like it might be worthwhile. At that point, for the end of the month, the report is around 25 pages, and then we start whittling it down and trying to figure out, no, that one doesn't make the cut. So, but I think, I don't know, the March one that we're talking about, It was a long one because the Enterprise Connect. It was about 13, 14 pages, as I recall. It was a pretty full one, usually around 10 pages, um, and a lot of content in there. So,
Mhm.
um,
Well, I know you will be
so
at the Microsoft 365 conference while I'm at NAB, and I think there are going to be stories coming from both of those. One of the big NAB themes that are coming up is I'm already seeing press releases from traditional hardware manufacturers purchasing software companies or saying they're pivoting to software. And this whole idea that we're going to be making these boxes, the boxes are going to be more generic with chips and more software. So I think that's going to be. I know we've been saying that for years, but it's there are now companies that are hardware manufacturers are coming out and saying it in their press releases. So that I think is going to be
yeah,
one.
no, I think we're going to see a lot of that even in comms, and we kind of saw I kind of see that. I think in the last Insider we talked about Java returning to Neat, and I think that's kind of what got him excited too. Is that intersection of hardware and software. So in the olden days it was all about hardware, and then in the more recent days it's been all about software. And there's always been, Apple and a few, a handful of companies that have been kind of really good masters of both. And I think that little sweet spot of being a master of both is going to be where the opportunity is at, because of the software apocalypse and because of commoditization of the hardware. So we're going to see a lot of that. And right now in enterprise comms, it's mostly software companies. So it'll be interesting because there's not much need for hardware, but they'll find a place. They'll bring it out.
Mr. Dungay, thank you for joining us. What are you tracking for your radar for the short term?
Yeah, interesting. So I was actually looking at a HubSpot story this morning. Their flagship conference, which isn't until September, they've changed the name from Inbound to Unbound. And this is really reflective of how people are doing their research around tech vendors and things these days. So obviously that's a conference full for a lot of marketers go there. So and that is reflective of how AI is impacting that search. So yeah, I'll be interested to find out more about this kind of change. I know, Dave, CRM's dead apparently, but HubSpot are still changing, and so there'll be a lot to come out of that HubSpot camp, I think.
Well, it's interesting because I do think CRM is in trouble because it doesn't really do anything. But HubSpot is, more of a marketing automation story, and it does something. It's important, and it's a source of truth. And so what's happening in the contact center space is that you have all these sources of truth, and we've always kind of said CRM is the big one, but really CRM is just one of many, and CRM is the one that really doesn't have any information that we didn't give it. So HubSpot, I think, is going to be fine. I think the Adobe, I think a lot of the sources of truth in the enterprise that actually add a lot of value will be fine. I think CRM has been a big disappointment for many years, and it's going to catch up to them.
And David, I've just finished my presentation, or at least the first full draft of my presentation for Infocom this year, where I'm giving a presentation on how to choose your partners wisely. And I'm going to be very controversial in June at that conference this year because I've created 10 gates to be put into RFPs and RFQs that measure a company's profitability and the percentage of layoffs they've had. And basically, without giving you too many of the details right now, the gates that I put in basically say that if any of the providers you're going with, manufacturers or platform providers, have profitable beyond $1 billion, yet have laid off 5% of their company, they're disqualified from the RFP. Because that means they would rather do things for short-term gain in the markets than maintain support people and maintain people that understand the history of the products and maintain their bug fixes. So I think that's going to be a very controversial presentation, but I think somebody's got to come out and finally say it to protect the end user that are buying products from companies that are laying off the support staff. So I think yes, there are going to be some interesting changes this year, and I'll be happy to lead that one. David, where will we see you next?
You're going to see me hopefully at Infocom actually. So I'm looking forward to your the speech you kind of alluded to just there. And I'll just very quickly add to that. There is a movement that's happening, sort of labeled "people before profits," and some big business leaders do it. There's one here in the UK called Richard Tang, who owns Zen Internet. and that is coming to the fore. And I think as AI and the machines take over and people use that as an excuse to get rid of people, that will become more important in purchasing decisions ultimately. So I'm looking forward to. I'm going to sit in your session and see what you say.
Awesome. So that'll make
And
two of
David,
us.
will you be wearing your tuxedo at Infocom?
Always.
Always, always, yes.
So Mr. Dungay, if somebody wants to reach out to you and find out what you're doing nowadays, how can they get in touch with you?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you can find me on LinkedIn. I'm there on a fairly regular basis, posting and whatnot. But you can also come across to cxm.world as well. If you're interested in the customer experience space, we talk all about it on there, and we've got quite a thriving community. So come and check it out.
Final thoughts, Dave?
Well, I just want to acknowledge that March was an incredibly busy time. We had the Ring Central event just before that. We had Enterprise Connect. We had Mobile World Congress. There was just so much going on in March, and of course, Enterprise Connect made our insider much thicker. April, I was looking forward to a nice, peaceful April, but it hasn't yet delivered that, and so I think April is going to be a pretty another packed issue, and yeah, a lot of stuff going on.
And how can people find out about subscribing to the Insider Reports?
Well, they shouldn't ask me because I'm kind of mean, but if they ask you, you might give them a discount. And so you should talk to Mr. Danto and ask him for his discount code.
So we'll give you a link to the website so that you can see what it looks like right here. But sure, if you reach out to me and send me a note, we'll work out a discount for you. And thank you very much for watching. We're going to try and do these more regularly, at least monthly, because we do the Insider Report monthly. And stay tuned and look for the next one. Thanks very much.
Thanks, guys.